very much. I'm going to talk about the Scotty Creek Research Station. Now, I realize that the focus of today's seminar is on drought and wildfire, but those haven't been particularly prominent at Scotty Creek over the last few decades. So I was given permission to talk about factors that, how the landscape at Scotty is dramatically changing and how that in turn might change its susceptibility to fire and drought. So Scotty Creek is located in the southern part of the Northwest Territories. It's about 50 kilometers south of the confluence of the Liard and the Mackenzie rivers. It drains an area of about 150 square kilometers of high boreal forest and wetland. Our studies are mainly focused and have been focused since 1999 in the headwaters near a place called Goose Lake. And the basin has been gauged since 1996. Now, excuse me, Scotty Creek's also in a region of the Northwest Territories called the Decho. And the Decho region occupies the southern margin of discontinuous permafrost. It also occupies an area of the Northwest Territories that has warmed significantly over recent decades. And for that reason, we often refer to this, the Decho region, as the front lines of permafrost thaw. It's where permafrost isn't only thawing, it's literally disappearing from the landscape. And that's of great concern to the communities in the region. And Scotty Creek, being nestled in amongst the communities, is well positioned to engage with them on all things permafrost, mitigation, adaptation, and processes, and so on. So we base a lot of that work out of the station, shown here. It consists of a number of semi-permanent buildings. There's plumbing, heating, electrical systems. There's Wi-Fi. We operate throughout the summer as well as during the winter. And if you were to walk to the edge of town here, you would get to the trailhead of about 5 kilometers of GeoRunner pathways or boardwalks. And we use a color-coded system, lots of "You Are Here" maps, and that's because we engage heavily with local communities, and we don't want to have, young ones or elders lost on the landscape, or me lost on the landscape. So if you're walking along the GeoRunner, you'll find, a large number of meteorological stations, such as shown here. I think there's 20 or so, including a flux tower shown down the bottom right, and infrastructure, hydrological infrastructure shown over here in the top left. And at any one time, you'll find a number of experiments going on, such as shown over in the bottom left. Now, if you're interested in what's going on at Scotty Creek, you can go to the scottycreek.com and click on the map and any one of the symbols on the map, and that'll give you the metadata, what's happening where. I don't have a lot of time, of course, to go over all of the details of what is being collected data-wise, but just a couple of examples. Here's snow survey data that we've, in this example for forest and wetland since 2006. Radiation data, incoming and outgoing short and long wave, again for different land cover types, averaged over several. I guess a couple of decades. Now, in this landscape, forest represents permafrost. It tells us where the permafrost is. So when permafrost below the forest thaws, the forest above it disappears as well. And that happens quite dramatically, as seen in comparing the bottom two photos, 2003 on the left to 17 years later on the right, where there's no permafrost to be found here anymore. That's about 50 or 60 meters across. And this correspondence between forest and coverage and permafrost coverage has enabled us to map out the distribution of permafrost by proxy with the forest cover over since mid last century, essentially. And hydrologically, what's of interest and importance here is that it's essentially opened up the landscape. So the yellow is permafrost, and the green, a lot of the green areas were formerly impounded by permafrost, but have over the years become hydrologically connected to the basin drainage network. And that means that water is able to escape flow away from areas that were previously impounded, either by new talic layers shown here on the left here, which conduct water all throughout the year, or by new overland flow paths, as shown between these two wetlands here. And it turns out that we can go back to our water level recorders that we've had distributed over the landscape over the years, and see if we can detect water level change. And sure enough, there has been very clear dewatering, of the landscape over the years as a result of introduction of these new drainage pathways. And that has implications for basin drainage in the region. In this example, we're looking at two average decadal hydrographs, one for the 70s and 80s and the other ones for a recent decade. In the earlier one, we see the runoff ratio, that is the proportion of precipitation that's translated into runoff, was only about a quarter, whereas now about half the runoff, half the precipitation runs off. So anyway, studying these different types of processes has enabled us to put together conceptual models, and they've formed the basis of numerical descriptions of the same. We've also gone outside of Scotty Creek to see if the changes that we've observed within Scotty Creek are occurring throughout the region. And NASA above has helped us with that, flying transects over these study sites down into the northeastern BC. And that's enabled us to understand the stages of land cover change and the processes involved in moving us from one stage to the next. You can imagine that these stages would have introduce a different fire and drought environment. So as I mentioned earlier, we work closely with local communities on such things as co-developing research questions. We work with communities on implementing field courses on the land camps. We do that throughout the year, in the winter and in the summer as well. And a lot of these activities are outside, of course, but we also have increased capacity to do indoor activities, some laboratory work and so on with the students. The community members often come to Scotty Creek for a variety of engagement activities and events. And likewise, we go into the communities for a number of events, including, in this case, a mapping workshop. We also work just outside the communities on training students and guardians on monitoring techniques, as in this case. Okay, I'll just end here, but I want to extend a big thank you to the Decho Guardians. I think a lot of our community engagement really paid off during COVID, because we were locked out of the territories. But the Decho Guardians really, they jumped into the driver's seat and kept Scotty going, ran all the operations, and they did a great job. So thank you to them, and thank you to you for your attention.
Thank you very much.